Hi, I'm Dr. Gaby Cora and welcome to my show, Dr. Gaby's Take, Make Life Interesting. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 7, Empathy and Open-mindedness. In a study with 46 adults with at least one gay parent, 28 out of the 46 spontaneously said they felt they were more open-minded and empathic than their counterparts. Why are there issues around being open-minded and empathic to begin with? The first point is fear. We fear what we don't know. We fear what we don't understand. And in general, the tendency to fear revolves around issues around religion, revolves around issues around sexuality, and around issues around ethnicity. So why about sexuality? Well, straight people may not understand why some people would prefer to have a gay partnership or a gay relationship. Someone who is white may not really understand what it means to be Hispanic or of any other kind of ethnic background. And last but not least, for people who are strictly Catholic, they may not understand what it is like to be raised in other religions because that was not their experience. Now, the second point that's interesting in this case is rigidity. Now, rigidity has a nature background, meaning we're somewhat wired to be more flexible or more rigid. We are wired that way. So believe it or not, there are some genetic predispositions to make us more rigid than other people. Now, what happens sometimes when that rigidity factor is very strong? Well, oftentimes we feel people get stuck. So for example, if I said that whoever does not agree with my religion, if I'm Catholic or Protestant or Jewish or whatever other religion, chances are I'm going to be very narrow-minded in my point of view. And I'm not going to be so open about realizing or even understanding or even wanting to listen to people thinking something differently from me. So this is an interesting point to look at. Sometimes we see this with different generations. So we find people saying something like, in my days or in my generation, we would have never done this other thing. Well, guess what? Time goes by even faster these days. And chances are things are moving a lot faster than they were moving before. So that's one of the things that we're going to see with that rigidity. Last but not least, regarding rigidity, we may tend to see things black or white. The gray zone may be somewhat more difficult for us to even understand. Now, the third part that I think is very important to share that happens so much when we tend to be more narrow-minded and when we don't tend to understand other people as much is that we end up isolating ourselves by rejecting other people of other faiths, of other life choices and or other ethnicities. We tend to isolate ourselves. So remember that the rejection comes with isolation. And the problem with that is that in the end, you feel yourself more distance from even those people that you love. We all have extended families, and many people within our families, whether it's our kids, our parents, our uncles, or our aunts, or our cousins, or nephews, they won't be exactly the way that we think they should be. So the more that we can mingle with them, the more that we can ask them about their lives, the more that we can be open about our lives and their lives, the better of a life experience we're going to have. Thank you for joining me and hope you enjoy the show. My guests today are a gay couple with a very interesting story to share. Hope you will enjoy meeting Jesse Walters and David Troutman. Hi, I'm Dr. Gaby Cora, and I'm here with Jesse Walters and David Troutman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with me today, and thank you for sharing your story. Jessie was sharing a little bit of that story last night, but I'd love to hear it fresh from you. So tell me a bit about your child.
Our child, our daughter is Faith. She's a healthy, happy 2-year-old, redhead, rambunctious, funny little girl who is biologically my niece. She's adopted by us as a same-sex couple. She was born to my sister. I have a youngest sister who, when she found out she was pregnant, she has bipolar disorder and some addiction issues and knew that she couldn't raise the child. So when she found out she was pregnant, she asked my partner and I if we would be interested in adopting her and raising her.
So who received that phone call?
We received it actually on Father's Day. Yeah, she was pregnant like a month or two, called us out of the blue, and had said, "Oh, I know you like kids and you've always wanted to raise an infant. Here's an opportunity." And the way she said it was kind of surprising to us. Kind of came out of the blue.
So you received that phone call.
Yes.
What happened next?
I actually was a little shaken up. I was like, okay, I don't know what we're going to do about this. We were in our 40s. Jesse was in his early 50s, and I'm like, are we a little too old to be raising a baby? I don't know if we should do this. What is it going to be complicated? Is it going to be complicated to go through this process? But then Jesse, what did you say?
Well, we have a former foster son, Raul, who's 22 now.
Okay.
He's out of our home, has been for several years. So to me, it was just a natural, because I know that David just loves babies. His mother does. And I thought this is the one thing that he missed out on in our previous adoptive experience, was having a child, from the get-go to raise. And so knowing how much that I thought that would mean to you to have and particularly somebody who's a blood relative, it just, to me, it was just like a no-brainer. And I thought grandparents are raising kids nowadays, because they're the child's parents have, left or whatever. So we're not as old as a lot of these grandparents are. I guess we can do it.
Right.
But I was all for it, and I knew that it would just make his heart sing.
Right. He said, of course we're going to do it. So that was pretty much.
So it was a done deal.
It was a done
Very
deal.
easy.
Emotionally.
You, Jesse, it was like, sure.
It didn't seem to me like it was going to be the end of the world for us to do it, and I knew what it would mean to him, so why not?
And then, how about you? Did it take you a little longer for this to sink in?
It did a little bit, because Jesse had mentioned about our previous foster son and our experience with that. There were some issues that were very difficult about raising him, and we had a lot of issues through his teenage years, and we were going to adopt him but ended up not finalizing it. So there was some healing, I think, from that experience. And when this situation came up, my sister also has issues within the family that are difficult to deal with sometimes. I thought, well, how is this going to affect? We have to think of the welfare of the child first.
I see.
And I wanted to kind of negotiate how we would negotiate that relationship with my sister and who the birth father was, who we didn't know at that time. So there was a lot of thinking about, like, okay, there's all these things to figure out.
So you wanted to get organized with this, and so your sister tells you this, you say, sure, how long had you been together already as a couple?
21 years.
So it had been a while. By then you know one another pretty well. And you've already had this other experience with your other child.
Which we learned a lot about parenting from that. That was a really big learning experience.
So your sister tells you this, you realize that she's not been well. She's been bipolar, she's also had addiction problems. Did you think that she was going to change her mind? Or did you feel that this was going to be a done deal?
You're shaking your head, yes.
I think everybody does who is
Yes.
presented with this opportunity, thinks there's a chance for the birth mother particularly to change her mind, yeah.
Did she have other kids?
She had some other children. Her son is being raised by my parents.
Okay.
And she has 2 twin girls that are being raised by her ex-husband. So I didn't have the feeling of, oh, she's going to change her mind, because she was
Right.
very upfront at the very beginning of the pregnancy, but I know I can't raise this child. I can't do it. Would you do it? and we were there through the whole pregnancy, kind of keeping tabs on things. And she was getting help from a social worker and therapy to kind of get her ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of sensed, yeah, she's not going to change her mind, but there is always that thought in the back of your mind
Right.
that something could happen. Yeah.
So in a way, you were taking care of her during the pregnancy, making sure that she was okay. Faith comes home. Did you take care of her right after she was delivered at the hospital? How did she come to you, and how did those adoption administrative, paperwork go through?
Right. Well, she was due the end of January, and through the pregnancy, we mentioned living in Florida about how do we set up an adoption here in Florida. So we went to a couple different attorneys. It ended up being that I would do a kinship adoption. We would fly up. We'd arrange to be there for the birth, be there for the birth, have a room in the hospital, go through the whole adoption process where the adoptive parents have rights to visit the baby. My sister was going to sign the baby over after 3 days after birth. So we had that all set up. The baby came 3 weeks early in a bit of an emergency. So
Well, it was supposed to be a C-section, and we had plane tickets to go to Philadelphia.
Right.
So when Faith came early,
then we panicked, and and I got on a flight and got up there the next day. It had been some complications, and my sister was in ICU, and the baby was in NICU, but everybody was healthy. Ultimately, it was just a bit of a scare coming early.
Right.
So we got up there. I got up there. Poor Jessie had to stay behind. We hadn't had the baby shower yet. You were here for the baby shower, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was at the hospital with my sister and the baby the whole time we were there, and all got released together.
So Faith comes home after how many?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. It was a week in the hospital, and then a week I had to stay in. The baby was born in Pennsylvania, so I had to stay there a certain period of time.
And how were you ready for her at home?
well, we did have the bridal shower, or the baby shower. And
That one will
That
come
really
in.
is.
that was, there was a lot of people. There was like 40 people, and they gave us everything we could possibly need, like 5 of everything. So house was pretty set up as best as I could figure to do it. And then David Nutley flew back with Faith, but with his mother. So she came down and stayed with us for a couple of weeks, which really made it easy.
Right, so we were pretty set up physically ahead of time. But after I felt being with the baby by myself for 2 weeks with my family and my mother, I remember walking off the flight and just walking up to Jesse and just crying and giving him the baby going, "We're here finally, we're finally here."
Tell me a bit about Raul. How did he come to your lives?
We talked about adoption for a number of years, and we went to an adoption fair where there were 100 kids running around and playing games, and the parents who are prospective adoptive parents can kind of check the kids out and ask about 3 or 4 of them after the fact, So we loved his personality. He was very engaging and made good eye contact. He was good with adults,
How old was he?
He was like 9, I guess,
Just
at the
turned
time.
late 9, just about 10.
And did you both see that right away? About his personality?
Oh yeah, I think so, yeah.
So then we had to go to his group home and be like volunteers for a couple of months, go down on Saturdays and have lunch with the kids and everything. And then they finally take the child aside and say, there's people that have been coming here as volunteers the last 3 months. Well, I think they're actually interested in you being their forever child, So that's, I guess, a pretty difficult conversation for the staff to have with a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it was 2 fathers, it added another dimension. And they hadn't really done much work with the kids on how there were different kinds of families. You could be raised by your grandparents, or one person, your mother, and not have a father in the home. So they had to do a little work around that. But eventually, he seemed fine with it, and he moved in with us. It was 10 to
That was an interesting experience though, because it was he had been in foster care and he was going to come into our house pre-adoptive. So we did have to get to know the child. And the group home was 7 or 8 boys between like 9 and 12. And we couldn't make it open that we were there for Raul to look into adopting him. And it was interesting as a gay couple going into this group home with a lot of young kids, and they're like, who are these people? And
So you saw a little bit of that apprehension. How did you?
Actually, the kids were craving attention and they loved being there, but it did take a lot of explaining about different, there was a lot of work on different types of families. And
How did you deal with that with the staff, mostly? Because if they were like, who are these people coming in, how did you chat about who you were, what your intentions were, and everything?
I think we were a little nonplussed by the situation. Actually, we're not big activists, but I thought this was 2000, New Jersey, which is a pretty progressive area, and it just amazed me that people in social work would never have had this kind of conversation with the kids. Not necessarily about gay parents, but that not every adoptive family is going to have a mother and a father.
Right.
That there are different kinds of scenarios. So I think we were a little taken aback that they hadn't had that discussion, but they seem to recover pretty quickly.
yeah, and I guess we're glad that we could give them an opportunity
Yes.
to maybe educate themselves and
That age
the
is a
staff.
very difficult age to put, to place a kid at a home or to have other parents who may be interested also in adopting them. So it was an interesting opportunity for you. Raul comes home, and how did that go for you? He had been at different foster homes
Right,
before,
and
so good old habits, bad old habits,
it's a
tough situation for these kids.
Yeah, it's a difficult age,
Yeah.
that preteen years. So we had an idea of what I think parenting was going to be in our head, and we'd made a conscious choice when we were going to adopt at that point to adopt an older child because we thought there are so many children in the world that need homes, and we'd met so many of them at the adoption fairs. Wow, some of these kids, I could see. We always said there was a good Raul and a bad Raul. Well, let's focus on the good Raul and push toward that. He could be a very charming, friendly, wonderful kid. But on the flip side of that, from being born to a drug-addicted parents and having a lot of foster care experiences, there's a lot of anger issues, behavioral issues. So it was pretty intensive with therapy, with a lot of support. And we really tried hard and had a good couple years living with them, but there were some behavioral issues that kind of spiraled out of control. That at that point, I think we're like, this is more than we can actually give this child.
Did you stay with him until he grew up? What happened next?
He actually ended up getting in trouble, and he ended up in a group home. And he was 5 hours away from us. He was in Norfolk, and we would drive down every other month for the weekend to see him for many years. But I guess one of the proudest days of our lives as parents was when he graduated from a regular high school. He went his final senior year in New Jersey to a regular public high school. We went to the graduation and took him out to dinner, and I thought, well, at least he got that notch in his belt. He has had some issues before and since, but they can't take that away from him. So I'm always proud that he did that.
So you were planning to adopt him, but at the same time there were some difficulties around that. What happened?
Well, Jesse had mentioned he had gotten into trouble, in behavioral trouble, and then ended up in a psychiatric hospital for 6 months, and then had to be placed, and they diagnosed him with some mental illnesses, which crystallized a lot of things that we hadn't really seen before. It made things make sense. So even though we were very close to finalizing the adoption, it was a really tough choice because you're taking on legal responsibility, you're taking on a lot of issues that we thought, this is just, we love them, but we can't do all of this for him,
And they kind of explain, that sometimes the kids will sabotage the
Yes.
adoption
Right.
right before when they know it's about to be finalized. And
Yes.
I kind of think that's what happened.
I think there was a lot of that. It was pretty severe. But when he got diagnosed and got medication and got group home support, It was funny, we were no longer had legal rights because we weren't adopting them, but the social workers, everybody would contact us for permission or to check in. So for years, through his high school, we were keeping tabs on him, visiting him, bringing him to our house at Christmas and on weekends, and
You stuck around.
he was in our life. And that's what I think we're proud of, is because nobody had stuck around in his life as long as we did. And we had a good relationship.
Is he still in contact with you every once in a while?
I just talked to him a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So,
So-
Facebook.
And the Facebook.
So the interesting thing is that in his mind, he knows that you've been around. Like, he knows who to contact if he's in trouble, or if he wants to chat with someone that he knows he can rely on. It looks like Raul would like to come to Miami, but it also looks like you would be somewhat concerned about some of his behavior. So how would you parent him in terms of helping him get his act together?
I think all we believe we can do for him right now at this point in his life is just be there and talk to him, and have him know there's still that connection, that familial connection with us. But he's got some issues that a lot of young people in their early 20s are working through, and until he gets a little more mature, we made it pretty clear to him that he's not going to be staying with us for any length of time.
While you're raising a little one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he ended up getting married himself, and his wife is pregnant, so they're starting a whole nother generation. But I think he's with her. They live, or they're in contact with his wife's family.
Mhm.
So in some ways, it's good that he has a connection now to family, which he's always wanted. So there's some support there, but we just listen a lot when he calls, and just let him get issues out and kind of give advice. But like Jesse had said, it's a little difficult to get too involved, because we kind of need to draw the line, because we've seen some of the issues he's gotten into. We don't want to invite that into our life.
So it looks like he's really trying to get his act together, and he's trying to get some normal life with his wife and with a new child, and he really looks up to you for that normalcy too.
Well, I wish I
In
could say he was
some way.
trying to get his life together.
Not as much?
He is married and he has a kid on the way, but I don't know how much I was looking to get my life together when I was 22 either, so I wouldn't be too harsh on him.
How are you looking into raising Faith these days? So what are your arrangements for taking care of her, or playing with other kids? What do you do?
Well, was fortunate enough to be able to stay home the first year of her life and take care of her. David works from home, and that sounds like it should work, but it doesn't. If you've never had an infant, you'd have to
Yeah.
take our word for it.
It was fine the first couple of months when she could sleep in a pouch most of the day, but once she starts moving, that's a problem. So after like 4 months, you be much more full-time.
And then I guess when the job that I started in July opened up, it was kind of a perfect job for me, and we had to talk long and hard about if I took it, what we were going to do, because she wasn't even 2 yet, and daycare seemed a little daunting for such a young child, but that's what we ultimately ended up doing.
And many parents do it from much earlier, so.
Of course.
But when it's yourself, we were, oh my gosh, she's so young. How can she be away from us all day?
Right.
But we were great to have that first year and a half with her at home, and just developing in the past 4 or 5 months, she's in a full-time daycare. Basically, it's a couple blocks from our house. Jesse works in the neighborhood, I'm at home, so we're all within a couple blocks of each other, so we can access her easily. But usually there goes in the mornings around 9 until like 4 or 5 a.m.
Has your sister been involved at all, or does she want to be involved at all, or how do you feel about that?
She seems almost the way you would want a birth mother to be if they were doing this, giving their child to you to raise. She doesn't have too many maternal instincts, so I guess that makes it a little easier for her. But she has kept her distance, but she's also been reminded, I guess a couple times, David's reminded her that we're not quite ready for her to be a full part of Faith's life. There were some issues at the hospital regarding her signing off on this because of pressure she got from the baby's birth father. And we weren't real happy with her attitude during that very trying first few days. So she's been pretty respectful of our request that she give us a little space for a couple of years. And I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think, she, like Gaby had mentioned, she does not have too many maternal instincts, and she's not too close to her other children, which is sad in one way, but it's also good in one way that because she lives her life sometimes not in a good way and is kind of inappropriate with some of her older kids, telling them things they shouldn't know. So it's good, I think, to have a little distance. But I keep her updated. I give her photos. I send notes every once in a while. But we've made it pretty clear that she's got some things to work on in her life, and when she gets a little more pulled together and can relate a little better, we'll talk about how that relationship can be.
It looks like she truly trusted you in making sure that the baby was going to be fine.
Yeah, and that's my mother always says. She goes, well, at least she made that right decision. She might not be a good mothering person, but she made the ultimate right decision to think of the baby's welfare and know that the baby would be taken care of.
And
it's a very selfless thing for her to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not easy on that end, and it looks like even if it was difficult for her to decide to let you take care of her fully for these years, it may have been a little hard on her, but it looks like she's trying to make the right choice for the baby's sake.
Right.
What do you foresee, or is there anything else that you think would be interesting to share?
I'm just enjoying having this baby around, and it's an experience I never thought I would have. As a young man growing up when I was gay, I never thought that you would ever have kids. That never occurred to people back in the 70s, I don't think, who were gay. So I'm just really enjoying the stuff we do together as a family. It's like corny and very traditional, but I really like it. And I say kiddingly to David a lot that I don't really want her to go away to college because I'm going to be in my I'm gonna be 70 when she gets out of high school. So I don't know how many years I'm going to have with her, and I just want her as close to us as possible for as long as I can. It's very selfish, but that's the way I feel about it.
Right. Yeah, having the baby, it being so unexpected, it was just a huge change in life direction. Like Jesse mentioned, I was kind of heading into middle age, and we moved to Miami, and we were dealing with a lot of different things in our life, and didn't think of a baby. I guess that sometimes straight people do that too. They have a kid out of the blue, and we're having a baby. But
it was a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, but we always say this experience is going to either keep us young or kill us. But we're happy to say in the first 2 years it's kept us very young, and Jesse mentioned him being older when she leaves high school. Just the experience of watching the development stages, it's so much different when you do go through it yourself, rather than with nieces and nephews or seeing somebody else do it. It's really amazing, and we try to be very low-key parents and not be too over-parenting or too hyper, and I think our age helps with that a lot. I feel being older parents, we've experienced a lot in life, that we're a little more mellow about raising her, and we've kind of been through some really difficult parenting issues, and we learned a lot about each other and kind of got a lot of that, how do we react as parents together, and what have we grown up with that's affected how we react into issues. We've kind of gotten through a lot of that, and it feels like a whole different, fresh start with faith, and I think it's just been a joy to get to experience her, and I hope that it'll be a very different family dynamic than what we had growing up, being away from extended family, but she'll have just an amazing experience. We always say living here in Miami and kind of having a whole different way of growing up, which should be a lot of fun.
Well, lovely. Thank you so much for coming. I enjoyed sharing, your story, listening to your story. That was wonderful. Thank you for joining my show. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jesse Walters and David Troutman as much as I did. And let's think about a couple of things that we can do to make life even more interesting. The first point is, how can we fight fear of the things that we don't understand or about the things that we don't really know? Well, first of all, I personally live in a very diverse community here in South Florida. And I must admit, for example, that the first time that I even heard of a gay couple trying to have kids was several years ago, about 15 years ago. It hadn't even occurred to me that a gay couple could have kids. Just pretty much like what Jesse mentioned during the interview. It hadn't even occurred to him that a gay couple could have kids before. That was a similar experience to me. And initially, I recall being very surprised about it. Now it's a lot more common. So realize that at first, some things may shock you or may surprise you, but be open to go through, to work through that fear and or that shock and or that surprise so that you can have a better and more interesting experience. The second point is, if you know that you are very rigid, that you tend to be very narrow-minded, and you also realize that that's keeping you somewhat away from the people that you love, try to see if you can have more open conversations with those people and try to hold your judgment before you jump in and comment upon your disapproving, disagreeing, or not liking whatever your loved ones have decided to do. So this is a very difficult thing to do, but the more that you can become aware of your own rigidity, the easier it may be for you to try to work through this. The third point that is also last but not least here is, remember that by becoming very rigid and not accepting of those people around you, you will not only reject them from being around you, but you will also end up isolating yourself. And I've seen way too many people in my practice not having a full, great life experience because they feel alone, because they feel empty, and because they feel that the people that they love don't align with them, don't connect with them. Well, guess what? If I'm the first one to judge, people are not going to be around me either. So these are just some things to ponder about, some things to think about that will hopefully help you make life interesting. Enjoy.